Everyone, good day, good morning, wherever you're in the world. Welcome to another Power BI section brought to you by UrBizEdge. So for today's section, we'll be having Beyond Buttons, More Than Meets the Eyes. It will be taken by James Bartlett. It was brought together by the collaboration between Enterprise DNA and UrBizEdge. So for some of you that I don't know, Enterprise DNA is also a data company in US. They specialize in empowering Power BI users to change their world. So UrBizEdge, most of you already know us as a training company in Lagos, Nigeria. So UrBizEdge is a registered Microsoft Excel consulting, financial modeling, business intelligence, data analysis, and enterprise solution firm in Nigeria. We also specialize in helping companies and high-value professionals be on top of their business data. So most of you already know we're also a training company here in Lagos, Nigeria. So this is our calendar for our upcoming training. On the 6th to 9th of June, we'll be having financial modeling and financial planning training. Also, we are on the 11th to 12th. Also, we're having advanced financial modeling. Also, we're having a mock exam for some of you want to write the AFM exams. So I'll give a brief description about our special guest, James. So James is primarily driven by his desire to achieve maximum efficiency in everything he does, from being a senior data analyst at Des Moines University to open source project and volunteering to work on hobby. He's also a lifelong student, constantly looking for himself and also opportunities to teach others. Enjoys mentoring new employee at work and teaching disadvantaged school children how to code on weekends, which is very awesome. When he's not working, coding or volunteering or sleeping, James can usually be fun hanging out with his wife, dogs, and his two cats, or working on his hobbies, which I already said earlier today. His hobbies actually include music production, audio engineering, and also home automation. So no further ado, James, I want to write the section to you, so I'll stop sharing my screen right about now.
Okay.
Sharing?
Thank you very much. Should I go ahead and turn my screen share on now?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll do that now. Okay. So this is, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to come to speak here. I'm filling in for a gentleman named Reed Havens. He's of Havens Consulting. And most of the materials you'll be seeing here today in terms of the presentation originally came from Reed. And so if I stumble a little bit, it's because this was kind of a short notice and I'm not as familiar with his materials. However, I will do my very best to present it to the best of my abilities. So so there will be some files that we'll be looking at here today that will be available for download. If you want to get a copy of those, you can go to my GitHub, and they're in the PowerBits repository. I also blog on the PowerBI.tips website. So if you go there, you can find me. And I have basically the same username across all the different social media platforms. So it's James D as in David Bartlett 3 because I'm the third. So yeah, Twitter is usually the best place to get a hold of me if you want to socialize with me talking about technology stuff. If you want to network with me professionally, LinkedIn is a great way to do that. So I guess without any further delay here, we'll get into the actual presentation here. So this is kind of a trick question. The question is, which of these are buttons? And I won't necessarily make anybody have to raise their hand here, but it's a trick question because the answer is they are all buttons. And even though the fact that you look at these and go, wow, there's actually a lot going on here. They don't look like just buttons. Some of them look like cards. Some of them look like custom visuals. And really, it's actually possible to achieve a lot of this stuff without having to do anything with custom visuals. Just really creative use of the existing visuals that are available in Power BI Desktop. So it's kind of neat because when you have some of these things where there's actually dynamic information in the button, when you do things like make a slicer selection, it can change the values and things like the colors of the buttons accordingly. So Also, as I'm sure you've probably noticed, whenever I'm hovering over one of these buttons with my mouse, some of them anyway will actually change what's in the button to kind of indicate that, oh, that this is something that can be clicked on. This is a very common concept in user interface design, where you want to give someone a visual indicator when they're browsing through an application that this is something that can be interacted with. So unfortunately, that doesn't work all that great with touchscreen devices because there's really no mouse cursor moving around on the screen. So there's the whole concept of hover is really missing in the touchscreen environment. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind if you're developing a Power BI report with the intention that it will be used not just on desktop computers or laptop computers, but possibly on the Power BI mobile device on, say, an Android phone or an iPad. You want to keep in mind that if you're using the hover visualization, or I guess the hover capabilities as a way to communicate that this is something that can be clicked on, just to keep in mind that that won't be obvious to people who are using a touchscreen device. And so oftentimes I've found that the target audience or target devices for most reporting is not usually mobile devices, so it may not be a problem for in your environment, but that's always a good thing to be aware of when you're talking with your stakeholders in a project, to just say, so what. This is a question that would probably get skimmed over a lot of the times and may not even be asked in a lot of times, but it's always important to make sure you ask what types of hardware they're planning on using to access these reports. So, all right. So, another thing that besides just hovering here, you'll notice that when I click on a button, it does an additional thing. So there are 3 different state levels here. So for a given button, when it's not being hovered, it's one color. When it's hovered, it's another color, and when it's clicked, it's a yet another color. So all of those are things that can be. Those are. Here, I'm going to use my Zoom It here, and I'm not very well practiced in Zoom It, so bear with me. Oh, man, that was the wrong one. There we go. So hopefully y'all can see my mouse cursor here. Those settings, the hover, the click, and the standard color are all under style. So we see the state. This is the different states. So default is what it looks like when you're not hovering over it, obviously when it's on hover, and then there's on press. So the default state is where you'll see it, this very light blue color when I'm not hovering over it. And then everything below this, all the way down here, all of these things are affected by this. So if I were to change this to on hover, settings in all of these things down here will change. And so if we look at things like the fill, here I'll collapse the text so we can actually look at, just because that's really not being used for much, but on hover, on press, and then you'll see that's a darker color there at default. And what's really interesting is that on buttons, where you can actually have an image that could be part of the button, then you can add that image to this by using the browse here. And of course, probably can't see that. It's all zoomed in, but yeah, it will ask you here, what file do you want to use as the image for this? And there's lots of different image types that it can use. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit so you can see that. These are lots of different image types that it can use. And one of the things that's important to think about when you're using an image in a Power BI report is the resolution, the screen resolution of the target device, the people who will be viewing that. And if you're using something like a JPEG, well, if the button is really, really small, it's probably not a big deal because it won't look very, it won't look bad because it's very, very small. But oftentimes, you're going to want to have an image that looks good no matter what size that icon or button may be. And so there is a type of image that's called an SVG. It stands for a scalable vector graphic, where and you may be familiar with Adobe Photoshop. Photoshop does standard icons like PNG, JPEG, those types of, or I guess, bitmaps. All of those are under something like Photoshop. A vector graphics is something a little more like Adobe Illustrator, where rather than having each pixel value displayed or stored in the file, it's actually just a list of this line gets drawn from this coordinate to that coordinate, and that line is colored this. It has this thickness. This is a shape, and that shape has this fill color, it has this border color, and that sort of thing. And because of the fact that those are rules that define the way that the image is displayed, it can be displayed at any size. So you could take a scalable vector graphic, an SVG file, and you could display it at 25 pixels by 25 pixels, or you could display it on the side of a building, and it would never ever look pixelated because the rendering happens when you display it rather than when it's saved by the program. So a bit of a complicated explanation for what all that means, but hopefully that has made it clear that when possible, it's a great idea to use SVGs in your applications, whether it be Power BI or any other user-facing application, because you never know what kind of monitor resolution your end users might use. If they've got a really high resolution monitor and you're using a low resolution bitmap type of image, it can make things look really pixelated and ugly. So, and that's one of the reasons why Power BI allows us to use SVGs. So it's also possible to do things like animations with SVGs, similar to something like animated GIF files, but again, with GIFs, they are another bitmap type of, so you'll notice that if you take an animated GIF and you try to make it big, it'll look pixelated. Animated SVGs do not have that problem. So, so how to make something like an SVG? Well, first of all, you can get them yourself. You can go out and download them from websites. There are plenty of websites out there where you can get SVG icons for free. But you can also create them yourself. And PowerPoint, believe it or not, is an easy way to create your own SVG files. So I actually have some files here. Again, these are provided by Reed. And these are the kinds of things where, let's see here, I will actually have to go into presentation mode on this to make it so that it displays. But each slide will have an animation, and then you can actually export slides from PowerPoint to SVG. So that's how we get something like this magic button here, with the little wizard on it. It has different states where when you're hovering over it or not hovering over it, it has different versions of those SVGs. So if we go and I click on this button here and I go back over to the style section here, we will look at so default state is where nothing's hovering over it. If we go to on hover, and we'll take a look at the, I'm guessing it's probably going to be under the fill section. Yeah, here we go. So it has the animated sheen, and that's why you're seeing that this sort of animation with the icon there. And so you can pick different animations for the different states. And so that's why when it's in default, you only kind of see it just doing this standard background like that. But then when you hover over it, it does something. Let's see, come on. It sort of resets the animation and goes the opposite direction. So this is another one of those things where if you want someone to understand that there's something to be interacted with, animations are a good, easy way to draw their eye to something. So it's like, oh, I need to pay attention to this. It's kind of one of the psychology aspects of reporting. So, and then there are things like, so that was this sort of like a swiping or sliding kind of animation. There's also animations like this where really all you're doing is just giving a visual indicator that this is something to click on. This is actually an SVG icon itself, this little blue bar here, and it's sort of a square shape. So it's this bar plus an invisible box together, and both of those together can be put into this image here, and then they're just left aligned. So if we would go to the style section here, and look at the, should be this icon here. Okay, yeah, so here you have the text where it says analytics page. And my mouse cursor keeps disappearing on me. There we go. And then if we want to, because we're not seeing that little icon there right now because it's in default settings. So if we want to go to on hover, that's when we'll be able to see, aha, here we go, vertical line. And this is, we can see it is aligned with a left horizontal alignment. So I could do something like change its alignment, and there we go to a different place. So obviously you have to kind of play with those settings a little bit to make sure that the what you're putting on the page lines up in the right place. But that's how you would do that. And then this little padding section here, this is how you determine how far away the other stuff in the bar will get. So let's say if I change this to 15, 13 pixels, see how much closer the text there gets to the bar. And if I just keep reducing that, eventually the text will overlap. And so you don't really want that. You typically want that to be, and that's why you kind of have, like I said, you have to play around a little bit to find the right mix to where the things on the button, if you have multiple elements, say text and an image, that they don't end up conflicting with each other. But yeah, so that's how that is all set up. And I guess we can go in here. So this is where we've got also other things like this one here, where if you have different icons that, say you have two different versions of the same icon, and here I'll zoom in again on this. If you go to a website where you can download SVG icons, oftentimes they will have a colored version and a non-colored version, or versions with different colors, say the same icon in blue and one in red, or that sort of thing. It's good to use those if you want to use them as a way to kind of visually distinguish between this one is active and this one is inactive. And so we do something like click on this one. Ah, that's right, we don't actually have a destination on this one here. But I can, if I click on the button, you can see that as I click it, both the background of the icon or the button turns black, the text turns white, and the image, this little icon here, turns color. And so if these were set up in a page with navigation, when you would click on this button and go to that page, then those would actually change at the same time. So let me show you what that looks like. I have another file opened up where that exact same thing is set up. So right now we are on page 1. There's page 2, page 3 here. And each one has its own separate, these are basically page navigation buttons. And each one, when you click it, if I click this button, it will take me to page 2 here. And you'll notice that this button really doesn't do anything different when I hover over it because it's already sort of active, like having a tab that's already the active tab. But when you hover over one of these other ones, this has indications that this is something that can be clicked on. So, and if I were to click this button, and I will do that now, let me zoom back out and click on it, it gives that initial feedback that, hey, this has been clicked. And then as soon as it navigates to that page, now the other icons have turned to black and white, and the one that's active is color. Again, just a quick visual reference for someone that's using the report to understand where they are in this space. When you have lots of different pages in a report, it can be really easy for users to kind of get lost and forget where they are. And so visual indicators like that are a great way to keep them kind of to make sure that they know where they are. So, all right, we're kind of let's see here. Well, maybe about a third of the way through the presentation or something like that. I wanted to pause and get take a few moments to see if anybody had any questions before we continue.
So if you have any question, you can raise your hands up and I will make you a speaker. So if any question, you can raise your hands up.
Yep. And anybody can ask questions throughout the presentation, especially if it's something that's related specifically to something that's in this presentation. We'll try to save the more general stuff toward the end, but if there's a question you have about a specific icon or a specific button technique, feel free to bring that up. I must have messed up the size of this one. Oops. Oh no, I see what I did. Guy. There we go. Okay. Well, I guess we'll continue on here. So back to this one here. We also have things where, so those were all sort of navigation buttons, so that's obviously one way that you would use buttons, but you also might want to use buttons for things like toggling between different visualizations without actually leaving the page that you're on. And so you would accomplish that by setting up, well, I guess here I should probably go back and talk about, if we're going to use button navigation first, we need to talk about how that's even accomplished. So on one of these buttons where there is a page navigation going on, when this button gets clicked, it actually changes the page in the report. In order to do that, you actually have to not only set up the visual elements of it, so what the button looks like when it's being clicked on or hovered over, that sort of thing, but also what it does. So there's the style of the button. So when we were clicking on the button and changing the styles earlier, that's under the style section here. But beyond that, you actually need an action as well. So what this does is says when the button is clicked, these are the things that can be done when you click it. So page navigation is one type of button action, and that's pretty easy. All you do is you just go to page navigation and you select which page you want it to go to. Pretty straightforward, not much to that. So things get a little more complicated when you want it to change the contents of the page that you are on currently without actually changing which page you are on. So in this case, something like this button here, we see that in its default state, it's in one position. When we hover over it, it kind of shifts to the center. And if I actually click it, it moves to the opposite side. And that, so let me zoom out a little bit so you can see, this actually changes the type of chart that's on the page. So some users may prefer a column chart, and other users may prefer a line chart. And it's a good idea, especially if you have users that in your stakeholders that are disagreeing about what they want to see on our report, or you just keep getting more and more requests for more pages. The more pages you have, the more difficult it can be for somebody to find what they're looking for. So oftentimes a good idea is to kind of give them options to be able to switch the contents of a single page to give them more variety or more abilities to change between different visual types, but without actually having a whole bunch of extra pages. So the way this kind of button works, unlike the action on the previous one where the action is going to a specific page, this one's actually doing something called a bookmark. And bookmarks are a little more complex than, come on, I'm gonna get us out of Zoom here. Hello. Uh-oh, I'm stuck in Zoom it.
Try Control 2 or Control 4.
Yeah, that's what I'm pressing, and it's not letting me out anymore.
Is that Zoom it?
It is.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
Try Control 1.
Yeah, I've tried all of the. I'm gonna see if I can actually kill it. There we go.
Okay.
That's very strange. Oh, that's fun. I think my keyboard has just died. Maybe that's why my keyboard shortcuts aren't working. No, that one works. Okay. Oh. All right.
But it tends to happen sometimes with Zoom. So most I use the magnifier.
Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there, but hopefully that's fixed now. Okay. All right. Let me just I think somehow my keyboard got glitched. I just unplugged the keyboard and plugged it back in. Hopefully that will fix everything. All right. Now I'm trying to remember where we were at. Okay. So where were we here? Yes. Oh, I didn't want to open a new file. Goodness gracious. What's going on?
Okay, so James, as you're doing that, someone's asking that, is it possible to get the PBIX file at the end of the session or something?
These files, the ones that I've been showing so far, these ones are property of Havens Consulting. So I would have to run that by Havens first before I'm not authorized to distribute them. However, I do have some files of my own that I will be just walking through in a little bit here, and I will definitely distribute those if you want them. So
okay.
Let me just figure out what the heck is going on here.
Thank you.
I don't know why I can't seem to just click on Power BI without it trying to open a new session. So that's very strange. Okay, well, I guess I'll just have to use my Alt Tab to get back and forth between different documents. So back to where we were on this one here. This is our the button we were looking at, right? And if I want to go into the actions here, this was the bookmark. And so bookmarks is this little pane here. And let me see if I can show that again. So bookmarks. We have area visible and column visible. And the way that bookmarks work is that you can basically change what is affected by the bookmark. And when you activate a bookmark, it will either change only what's being displayed on the page. It can also change what data is being filtered. It can change what page you're on, and it can do all three of those or any combination of those actions. So, like I said, bookmarks are they're sort of like page navigation because they can do page navigation, but they can do more than just page navigation. So if all you need a button to do is just go from one page to another, usually it's best to go with just the page navigation. But sometimes people want to stay on the same page and change the visual that's being displayed. So that's why we would do something like this. So we'll notice what happens if I actually just click these bookmarks directly, it changes. So that's what's happening when you click this button, is clicking the button actually activates a bookmark. So I'll show you where that's done in the settings over here. So we go to the action settings, we see that it's set to bookmark, and this bookmark says column visible. So there's actually two things going on here. There are two separate buttons that are stacked on top of each other. This one is the one that's visible, but if I click it, it disappears, and this is the one that becomes visible. So what happens with each of these bookmarks is it's changing the visibility of the buttons and the visuals at the same time. So here, I'll put that button back where it belonged before. And then we'll actually do this where when I click area visible, this area section here, I'll zoom in again so that people can see it. The area visible makes the area button itself, the area chart, all of that visible at once. If I change the column visible, it makes these things invisible and then makes the column button and column chart visible. So that's how that works, and it's sort of complicated to get all that stuff working correctly. And so generally, it's a good idea if you can to try to give people access to these different types of things in a way that's not as complicated. Because every time you add an extra item onto a report screen, even if it's just a button and doesn't have any data in it, every object on the screen takes a little bit of time to render when they open the report. And so if you have lots and lots and lots of buttons, even if they're just buttons and they don't have any data on them, it can still make the page take a long time to load, and it can create a bad user experience. So obviously that's completely up to taste or the organization to decide whether they're comfortable with allowing a page to load, take 1 or 2 or 3 seconds to load every time someone changes a page. But typically, people get frustrated with things if it takes a little while to load. And there's some research that says that if a page takes longer than 3 seconds to load, people will just walk away. They'll close the window, and because it frustrates them, and they're just used to having everything immediately. So there's good reasons to avoid doing too much of that if it causes decreased performance on the page loads. So. Oh yeah, I guess I could have shown how these things work a little bit closer up. That's what this demo page is for. So let's see here. We have things like these cards from earlier when we were looking at them on the main page, where changing the values actually changes the colors in there. And these are actually basically separate parts that are broken out into little individual pieces. So we'll look at the, basically, these are groups. And you can use the selection pane. I should mention, basically, whenever you need to get access to these bookmarks in selection pane do not show up by default when you open Power BI Desktop. These panes are invisible. So when you open Power BI Desktop, you won't even see them. So to get there, you actually have to go to the View tab up here in the ribbon, and then you can turn them on or off here. Same thing with the filter pane. So I'm going to actually leave that off because there's really nothing for me to do with the filter pane right now. But I'm turning bookmarks and selection on, and that is how we get to see these here. So one of the good reasons to have the selection pane open is because you can actually see the groups of icons or groups of items on the page. And when you select a group of something, it makes it a lot easier to click it, move it around, resize it, and things like that. All of the items inside a group stay together, and you can then do things like show and hide them together as a group. So when possible, especially if you have a sort of a complicated visual that you're trying to build that incorporates multiple components into one, if you group those items together, it makes it a lot easier for you to kind of keep track of them. So for instance, like I've got, this is Reed's logo up here, and this is my logo, and they're in this title section together. And I can basically, because that's all one group, I can show and hide it. And if I wanted to, say, take my logo and Reed's logo, and I wanted them to be a group together, I could right click on them and I can go group, or right now they're already in a group, so I'd be ungrouping them, but that's how you manage the groups. So and it's a really good idea to use groups whenever possible to make your job easier, especially when you're doing things like hiding and showing things with bookmarks. If you can use the group to show and hide things, then you don't have to do all the individual items within it. So all of that is to say that what we have here is what looks like a single object, but it's actually made up a bunch of different smaller objects. And so we have, of course, our date slicer. This is a standard slicer visual, and you can see that by when I click on this, the item in the selection, then it shows, yes, it is a slicer visual. And then so we have our different pieces. So this is a card visual. So that's pretty standard. People use card visuals for a lot of things, but you might have noticed, that's interesting. I don't recall being able to show the percent value of something, and then sort of like an up or down arrow showing whether it was an increase or decrease versus the plan. This is the value itself here, the 1202, and then here's what the plan says, or maybe sort of something like the commitment, or whatever the business wants to call it. If this is your goal, and then this is the actual value, then it's an 8% increase over the goal. So how would we go about displaying something like that? Normally a card doesn't give you that. Normally when you put a card up there, it just gives you a flat value like this does. Well, that you handle with DAX measures. So we'll get into that just a little bit here. This isn't really a DAX presentation, but it's important to know that measures can give you, can make your visuals a lot more compelling. So we have completed display here. And like I said, we won't get too heavy into the DAX stuff, but what this is doing is it's actually creating separate value parts that are being built, and conditionally, if the, so we've got these are, here's your percentages. It says here's your target, and then it's saying, okay, well, is the completed amount, the percentage, is it like basically, is it greater than what it was supposed to be, or is it greater than the goal, or is it less than the goal? And then it uses that condition to determine whether it should be putting an up arrow or a down arrow. And then it basically pieces those individual parts together with this variable here, and then returns the result. And that's how you get all this kind of written together into one. So measures, people are pretty accustomed to the idea of a measure in Power BI being something where you're doing a sum of a column, or you're taking the average of a column, or doing something a little more complicated than that. But oftentimes people think of a measure as being just a single value, whether it's a number or something like that. But it's actually possible to use measures to concatenate different values together and make sort of a meta measure that has more than one piece of data being represented in it, and that when you go and change values elsewhere by filtering things, that all of those individual values in that concatenated string will change together. So that's a really cool thing to be able to do with Power BI, and it allows you to save a lot of space. A lot of times people would have these kind of things in 3 separate visuals. They'd have, here's the percent of change, or percent over or under. They would say what, in a separate visual, they'd have an up or down arrow to show whether it was higher or lower than it should be. And they'd also have the actual value, all in separate visuals. And again, every time you have a separate visual on your page, it causes that page to take longer to load. So it's always a good idea to try to load as much of the data that you need on a page into a single visual as possible, and measures are a great way to do that. So I'll get back out of here. And okay, I've seen some things popping up in the chat here. Oh yeah, Paul says DAX gets me every time. Yeah, it's a great language, and I've heard I've heard there's a common quote that goes around out there, and I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but the quote goes, DAX is a simple language, but it's not easy. And it's one of those things where when you first get going on it, DAX feels really similar to writing an Excel formula, and it actually has a lot of the same keywords and function names that DAX does, or sorry, that Excel formulas do. But you'll also quickly notice once you get into doing the more complicated things with modeling in DAX that it gets really complicated quickly. And just to give you an idea, this is the book on DAX. Like, and it's, what is this thing? Like 800 pages long. So, and that's just one of my books on DAX. And like, I'm not even saying I've read the whole thing. It is a slog too. So, but you can actually get pretty effective results with DAX and doing really cool things with that without even really getting into the complex stuff. You may have noticed looking at that formula, it's not even really all that complicated. It's just taking multiple values and putting them into variables, and then doing a little bit of comparison logic or conditional logic on those variables, and then outputting a result. So yeah, something good to get into if you're doing, even if you're just doing front end design on reports and not doing a lot of modeling. DAX measures can really help consolidate different visuals that you might have had to have separate objects on the page for. So yeah, I won't go too much further into that. I think I've beat that dead horse enough as it is. And this is sort of the same sort of concept, doing things where, taking the background color of the visual and changing it based on the value of the values of the measures that are in there, and that's conditional formatting that can be done. If I go into the if I go to the object here, and then go into the style. So we have our on hovers and our on presses. That obviously that changes what's going on with the button as well. But let's see here. We go to the, try to get that shape selected here. Style. There is my effects. Aha, here we go. So when you have the something where you wanted to change color based on values, you can go in and you can say, okay, well, here is, I want the color to be a certain thing. So you can have things like formatting can be conditional. You can say, okay, what we want this to base this field on. You can say, well, I can do it with DAX. So DAX can give you things like let's see how this was set up originally. So we have completed KPI colors. So this is a field that is in here as DAX. And so we look at this and say, okay, what's it doing? Well, here it defines the green value, and this is a hex code for colors. You have your red, green, and blue values, 2 digits for each value. And so this is hexadecimal, so you basically have 0 through 99, and then it goes all the way up through double F. So 128 different values you can get per, or I believe maybe it's 256. Yeah, I think it's 256. So you have your green and red here, and then what's doing is saying, okay, well, if the completed amount variable, or if this is actually another measure, if it's greater than or equal to 0, it returns green. Otherwise, it returns red. And so this is a way to really it's a measure, and in a lot of ways, people are with Power BI, people think of measures as being, oh, this is a number, this is a word. It doesn't always have to be that. It can be basically instructions that tell the Power BI desktop application or the Power BI service how to format other parts of the page based on what the results of that DAX measure are. So we're getting into some pretty heady stuff here. This is a sort of Inception. We're getting deep into the woods with the with what all the things that DAX can do. But yeah, it's just really important to remember that the DAX is really not just a modeling language. It's a conditional language that dynamically changes the output values based on how the user interacts with. Well, that changes based on not just the contents of the data model. So like on a new day, new data gets added to the model and the values change, and the conditions on those values, of course, are evaluated every time that model reloads. So something that's green one day could be red the next day. And then in addition to that, it changes by the user interacting with the report. So this is one of the I think DAX is probably the most powerful data modeling language because of the fact that it allows the way that data is represented visually to change dynamically as new data is added to the model, as old data falls off of the, whatever your age limit on old data is, falls out of the model, and as users interact with the model by changing things like slicers. So yeah. Anyway, I think we're that's again, I've beaten the dead horse enough on that on the subject of measures there. So then you do things like having a card with a sparkline in it. So this is a sparkline visual that is actually a separate visual. This is a custom visual that's available from the if you go in Power BI desktop. So you have all your standard visuals that are up here in this little box here, and then if none of these visuals really do what you want, you can also get these custom visuals, and they're available from we go say get more visuals. Oh gosh, it wants me to sign in. Oops. Let's see. Probably should have done that ahead of time. I don't have my password manager handy, so I will not be able to do that. Okay, so but you can install lots of these custom visuals very easily from the custom visual store that Microsoft hosts, and any of the ones that are available through this Get More Visuals feature, they are to a certain degree vetted by Microsoft. There are ones that are certified, where those are considered extremely well vetted, but then your average custom visuals are more minimally vetted, sort of like the difference between how strict it is to try to get an app into the Apple App Store versus the Google Play Store. Yeah, there's also, you can design your own visuals, custom visuals, using either just developing them yourself from scratch the way that some of these companies like OKViz do. There's also some custom visuals that can be built from within Power BI desktop using some, basically you go get a custom visual that exists that has tools built into it for building visuals. It's kind of meta. Like there's one called Charticulator that is an official Microsoft one, and there's another one called Deneb. That's D-E-N-E-B. Let me pop up the website here. So we have come on, my browser's not playing ball here. Declarative visualization in Power BI. This is Deneb. So if you want to be able to design your own visuals, you can use Deneb. I'm trying to see if there's something like a screenshot or something like that to sort of show what it looks like. Yeah, here we go. So you're adding the Deneb custom visual from the custom visual store, and then it basically allows you to build your own visual right there within Power BI Desktop using essentially JSON. This here, where you're telling it here's what I want it to display and how I want it to display. So obviously this is the kind of visual that's already available in Power BI Desktop, but it doesn't stop there. There's plenty of really cool things that you can make with this, and same thing with Charticulator. So I will make sure that let's see here. I will drop this link in the chat, and then let's see here. Charticulator. What to do? Let me pull that up real quick here. Aha. Oops. Charticulator. Yeah, and again, this is one of those things where it's actually a visual that gets embedded into the Power BI Desktop. So as you build the visual from the Power BI Desktop environment, and all the changes you make are saved in your PBIX file. So there's no extra programming languages that you need to learn. There's no extra programs you need to run on your computer. You don't have to like install special extensions in VS Code or anything like that. It's all just built into Power BI Desktop. So definitely recommend either of those if you have a need for a visual that is not available in the Microsoft Visual Store. So I'm going to move this back off screen here so we can get back to things here. I know we're running a little close to the end here, so let's see. Okay, yeah, one or two more things here. So this is a button where if someone wanted to, there's a thing in Power BI where you can open a visual in focus mode, where it basically just shows just that visual and to the exclusion of all the other visuals on the page. So if someone wants to really dive in and look just at that visual without being distracted by the other items on the page, that's something that people often want. However, to get into that mode in Power BI, it's not always obvious, and so but there's actually a way that you can enter focus mode with a button. So you can do something like adding a button like this on a visual, and you can set it up so that when someone clicks it, the action that it takes is this is a bookmark called focus mode. And so this bookmark, what it does is it turns on that focus mode. So if I click this button, boop, people who've used Power BI a lot would probably look at this and go, oh yeah, that's familiar. I know what that looks like. And it has this little back to report button and everything like that. So and that allows you to make that button really nice and prominent, and puts it in a place that's really easy for people to find. And if you have things like, well, you may want to have the visual headers turned off on a visual because they kind of get they clog up the visual space on a report, but you still want people to be able to access that particular functionality. You can re-add it even after you've removed those visual header buttons by putting that bookmark button in there. So I think, oh, and then here we go. This is getting close to the end here. I wanted to point out that sometimes with some icons, you'll end up seeing these little faint lines around the outside of buttons, and I'm not sure if it's something you can see very easily, but you can see how this is sort of weird, like, oh, there's this weird little line that's showing up here, and it looks kind of janky. Like I wouldn't want that to be a production report going out and facing end users. Internal users would be one thing. It's even worse if it's facing users that are potentially paying clients of your business. So, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on with these, but I'll see if I can show how that happened. I'm going to move this up a little bit so we can look at it at the same time. So if I'm not clicked on it, and we can see that little outline is still there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the style section here. And let's see here, where is the, I think it may actually be the fill on this one. So it's basically just a slightly different color of gray from the background. So what we can do is, if the background is set to this sort of gray color, which I'm going to go and that's here in the canvas background, I can actually find the specific color that this canvas background is here, and it's this E6, E6, E6. I'm going to grab that hex value here. I'm going to go back to this icon here and go to the style section and to the fill here. And we will see that this color of gray is a darker gray. This is B3, B3, B3. And if I paste what I just copied from the other one over this, we will see that line disappears. So if you ever find yourself with going like, man, why am I seeing weird little like outlines on these icons and it looks ugly? Just go in and make sure that you've set the fill. And see, that's why I like this is I don't know how that's got this to be this color, this pink color, because I mean that icon, that color is actually built in the icon rather than the fill. So it shouldn't even really need a fill. But if I paste that fill color, oh, interesting. So that one is somehow coming from there. Well, I was playing around with this a little bit before the presentation, and I thought I had found the solution for that one. Maybe I need to do. Very interesting. Well, I'll have to play around with it a little more and see if I can come up with a solution for that. Why that has that there? Very strange. But let's see. I think that basically comes to the end of what I was planning on talking about here. Oh, almost. So that was all. So far, everything I've showed you was just the stuff that Reed gave me because he was originally scheduled to give this talk, and I wanted to make sure you all got the things that you originally signed up for. This is a report that I built for. I was doing a certification program through Udacity.com a while ago, and this is one of the projects that they assign is to do basically this fictional company Waggle that does pet supplies. And I wanted to point out that you don't always have to use images to create an icon in a clickable icon, or even an icon that changes as you. So you'll see here as I'm hovering over this. This is an icon that I use to toggle the filter pane. And some of you may have already seen this kind of thing before, where if I click this thing, it pulls out a filter pane, and this is basically here's all of the different slicers that you might want on the page. And you can either click on the button itself to hide the filter pane, or you set it up so that you click anywhere and it closes the filter pane. But this is something that I felt, well, this is a symbol that kind of looks like a filter to me, and I did this as a way to sort of prove to myself that I can set up an icon that doesn't even have to be an image. This isn't even an SVG. This thing here is actually a character. This is a Unicode character. And I'll show you how I set that up here. So this visual is actually style. This is text. And it's coming from the show filters default. Right? So that's when it is, when it is not being hovered over. If I were to change this to the hover state, it would change to the hover. So I'm going to go to the oh, you know what? I think it's a hidden. it. Let me go over to modeling here. Here we go, Unicode characters. So we can see here are things like show filters default, show filters hover. So I'm going to open up the show filters default, and we'll see. Oh, here, let me just unhide this. We can actually look at it in the back over here in the page. Unicode characters. Open up the show filters default manager, and look at that. So unichar is actually a function, a special function in Power BI that will generate, that will say, okay, well, this code, this is a Unicode value, and that code in Unicode makes this symbol. And so that's an easy way to, and because symbols, fonts are kind of, they are a scalable vector graphic. You'll notice that when you print something, it doesn't matter. You can change the font size all the way up to the biggest font there is, and you print it out. There won't be any fuzzy edges on the letters. So fonts, words, and Unicode characters, they all use a similar sort of technology to scalable vector graphics. And so anytime you need something to look nice on the page, you don't always have to have an SVG symbol for it. And if you have an SVG data set, you can basically connect to, sorry, not SVG. If you have a Unicode data set, there's lots of different public data sources you can connect to. You can get Unicode characters. You can load them into a table, and then you can use a slicer to go through that table and find all the different values you might want to use. And you can even do the same thing with SVGs. And that is the last thing I want to demo today, because I actually made this file just for us for today. So let me pull that up real quick here. This template file I'm about to show you is currently available in the repo, the GitHub repo that I put on the first page, the first slide. So I'm opening up this file. This file is called svgicons.pbit. That's a template file, and PBIT files, the way they work is you don't get any of the data that was originally in the file. All you get is just the connection information that says where to go get the data, and then any parameters that were originally set get blanked out. And so because I set this file up so that the parameters that you enter into it will actually generate what type of data is displayed, I thought, well, here, I can show you what this looks like. So I'm going to take a search term and put this in here and say we're going to find all the SVG icons for this search term. So I'll put one in here, and then maybe somebody in the chat can come up with another search term, and I'll show you what results we get from that. So I'm going to put in summer, because it's summertime now, and we'll see what kind of results we get. So I won't go into, during this presentation, I won't go into how I set this up in the back end, but I'd certainly be happy to chat with anybody that wants to talk with me about it. Connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I can show you how I built the query that goes to the website that hosts all these free SVG images, searches on the website, and then downloads the SVG files and then puts them on the page. So just a moment here, it should be finished. If I remember correctly, there's a, yep, okay, and there we are. And here's all these SVG images that are related to summer. And I have it set up so that if there's a particular image that you go, wow, I really like that SVG, if you click this little link icon here, it will actually download that SVG file directly from the website. And this website is svgrepo.com. And they're basically all free. So you can either download it and then use it by clicking the little browse icon over in your field or in the visualizations panel if you're trying to add a button. But there's also even ways that you can dynamically assign an SVG to a button. So just like I've used these SVGs and made them show up right here in this visual, you can use another visual like a card visual and make the SVG show up in that card visual, because the SVG is stored in the Power BI data set as text, but it gets rendered as an image. So this can make it really powerful, because you can say, well, I want to be able to get images dynamically from the internet or from my company's database, and then I want to display those images on the buttons or in the table in my report. And Power BI can handle that, because again, SVGs are basically just text. It's kind of similar to, I think probably the closest thing is they're sort of like XML. where the innards of them is basically just text and numbers, and it's all a matter of how it gets rendered that makes it display as an image. So, and like I said, this file is available for anybody to download on my repo. It's free. I encourage you to download it and use it and play around with it, make your own additions to it. I also want to make sure I credit. I learned how to add SVG images into a Power BI report from Jese Navaranjan. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. And so this is the video where she does a demonstration on how to do that, and then the blog article that she wrote about that as well. I think we are out of time. I want to make sure that if anybody had a, oh yes, I can definitely link to the SVG. I'm assuming that you mean the SVG website in the chat. Okay, so the website where I went, where that template, that PowerBI template goes to pull those icons from is svgrepo.com. And they do have an API, and if you're going to use this commercially, this website commercially, I would recommend actually getting an API key from them. I kind of hacked together this thing and just used the search function on their website and then did pagination. Again, I can explain all that offline if anybody wants to know more about it. But yeah, so I think that covers just about everything that I wanted to cover today. And again, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that this is again, most of this material that I was presenting today is courtesy of Havens Consulting, and I will also reach out to Reed and find out if he'd be okay with me sharing the PBIX files for some of these presentations files that he sent out. I'm not sure. Normally I think that probably this is proprietary stuff for him, so I'd be I don't think that he would want to do that, but I will certainly ask him anyway. Okay, so we wanted to open this up to questions. I know that there was certainly a desire to find out about things like advice for data and analytics careers and things like that. So I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you all may have about that.
Okay, so awesome, James, awesome section, awesome. I'll definitely watch this section again. I saw some nice tricks I will try when I'm done later in the day. Okay, so if you have any question, you can put it in the chat box. I'm actually checking through my other device. So if you have any question, put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. I can also promote you as a speaker. So any question so far?
Oh, okay, yes. It looks like there's a request for to go back to the slide with Jese Navaranjan's information. I'm pulling it up right now. I'll probably just put those links in the chat if that's okay, so that everybody can get them.
Yeah. That's fine.
So go. Just grab those links and drop them in the chat.
Okay.
There we go. Sorry, the formatting's a little weird, but hopefully that's okay.
Okay. What I do most times, I first copy it to a notepad and I copy it again. I first paste it to a notepad and I copy it again for a chat box. So it doesn't look weird most of the time. I think Microsoft Team. I know I've tried some of the stuff she showed today, but I still saw some new things. I'll definitely try again. So James, can you tell your career in the old data analytics field, and also what advice you have for people just starting out in this field?
Sure. So my career actually took a lot of crazy twists and turns. My college degree has absolutely nothing to do with technology or data or any of that kind of stuff. I went to school. I originally wanted to get into something having to do with IT, but the degrees that they were making for people like that, when I first started going to school, they basically threw all the freshmen into a really difficult Java class, and I almost flunked the class. And basically I ended up with like a D- or something, and so I said, okay, I guess I can't work in tech, and I worked all the rest of the way through college. I ended up working in I got my degree in human resources, and then after college I went into banking, and then I did real estate, and basically I was all over the place. But I still, my first love was always technology, and I always wanted to do that, but I couldn't ever figure out how to get into the career. But then it had been, let's see here, it had been about 10 years after I graduated college that I finally put my foot down and said, I am sick and tired of working in jobs where I'm not doing something that I care about. And so I decided I'm just going to go and spend some of my free time on the weekends and nights learning about tech stuff and trying to maybe make myself an attractive candidate for maybe just an internship. I didn't think I was ever going to be able to get a full-time job right away. But I basically worked really hard during the day, and then when I came home, I worked hard at night and worked hard on the weekends, and I basically didn't have hardly any fun for a few months. But I was able to, I went through a few different classes with Udacity.com. I think I mentioned them earlier that I got a certification from Power BI from them. But even before that, I was taking their JavaScript classes and basically just going through these classes, trying to find my way back into the tech industry, and eventually ended up getting an internship working with a company here in the Des Moines area. It's a regional grocery chain called Hy-Vee, and it was I had just happened to meet the director of their data and analytics department in a social situation, and just talking with him, we got a chance to kind of know each other. And he said, you're really passionate about technology. He said you should come try to be an intern on my team. He says, I don't have any full-time positions open right now, but you could be an intern. And at the time, I was working in a job. I was working full-time as a pharmacy technician. Again, my career went all over the place. I was working full-time pharmacy technician, not making very good money. I ended up getting, just as a paid intern, I ended up making like a 50% pay raise. So just to be an intern. And then 6 months later, after being an intern, I got offered a full-time job there. So I will definitely say I was very lucky. There was very little in the way of my skill or anything that went into this. But I will say that you can improve your luck a lot by going out and networking a lot. So if you're hungry and you're passionate and you're just doing everything you can to make yourself a more attractive candidate for trying to get into tech, if you are trying to get into tech, it goes a long way to be doing what you can, working on open source projects, working on certifications, things like that. And so that when you do meet someone who happens to be in the position where they could potentially offer you a position, then you've already basically made yourself the best possible version of yourself. That when they see, they go, wow, this person really is pursuing this stuff and seems really passionate about it. I should give them a chance. And so I think that's really the moral of the story with my career progression is that I took a lot of wrong turns along the way, and there's a lot of things I did either wrong or too late or that sort of thing. But when I eventually kind of got my act together, I figured out that I really just needed to do everything I could to make myself the best candidate possible, and then get myself out there, go to meetups. And anybody who's here right now is already doing the meetup thing. You're socializing with other people who are in this industry. You're learning. You're making connections with people. And so by doing that, you're increasing the chances that you'll sort of accidentally run into someone who happens to have a position or job or a potentially contract work or that kind of thing that can get your foot in the door. And then once you've had your first job or your first internship or whatever it is, then you have experience. And once you have relevant experience, it's so much easier to get a job. I basically, as soon as I had actual experience from that first job, I haven't had recruiters stop trying to recruit me ever since then. I haven't even had to go out and apply for jobs. It's just, recruiters constantly. And this is a really hot industry, the BI and data analytics. It's growing so fast. There are not enough applicants to fill all of the job openings out there. So if this is a career or an industry you want to get into, and you want to change your career to this, all you really got to do is start working on a little personal portfolio. Take some public data sets that are available. Oftentimes governments will make their data available to the public. So if there's things like climate data you can get, oftentimes you can get public utilities data, things like that, and you can start basically just putting those into a data set and make some reports just for your personal portfolio, just so you get experience working with it. And then when someone asks you later on, it's like, yeah, do you have experience with Power BI? You can say, sure I do. Here's the reports I've made. And And if you're using public data, you don't have to worry about exposing potential sensitive data to someone who may not be authorized to see it. So I see a question in the chat that says, how long will it take to develop a personal portfolio? Data modeling is the hardest. I would say, yes, data modeling is difficult, but it doesn't have to be extremely difficult, especially if you start with something simple. There's even a built-in data set with Power BI Desktop that is just kind of like basic financial data for like a fictional company. And it's a single table. You open it up, it's basically just like it's as if it was loading from an Excel sheet. So really there's not much in the way of modeling that you have to do if you're not trying to relate one table to the other. All you have to understand is like what it means to sum a column, or what it means to take the average or the min or the max value. And then from there, it's really just building the visuals on the front end that, here's a visual that displays these data points in these 2 different or 3 different axes. And, here are the slicers where you're changing how you want that data to be displayed by category. So I think to answer the question, how long it takes, it kind of depends on how complicated you want to get it. Like I spent quite a long time working on that project for Udacity, the one that had the cats and dogs stuff in it. Way longer than I probably should have spent on it, because I was really obsessed with like getting all the cool visual stuff working well. You can make a really, really impressive report visually out of really not much in the way of data. And if you're really wanting to spend your time, career-wise on making really good visually appealing reports, then yeah, you would want to spend your time doing that. But I think that if you want to get to a point where you're hireable as a sort of generalist, where you're not specifically just a report author, but you're also a little bit of a data modeler, I think your best bet is to try to make yourself a little bit of both. I think that time-wise, you could probably have a pretty substantial portfolio of reports built within 6 months. So then that's from starting knowing nothing at all about Power BI all the way up to to where you could get potentially your first job or internship. Just as an example, that first internship for the interview, when I was scheduled for the interview, I had about 3 days to prepare for it. So I went out and I found climate data, and I downloaded that climate data set. I built a really rudimentary model, and I built reports in Power BI Desktop that showed that I understood the basic concepts of how data modeling works. But I went from not even having Power BI Desktop on my computer, not knowing anything at all about it, and I spent a weekend just teaching myself the basics of Power BI Desktop. And then by the time I went to that interview, I brought my laptop with me, and I showed them, yeah, look, here I can show there's a trend that shows that temperatures are rising, and it's actually impacting these latitudes and longitudes on the Earth the most, and we're seeing, and at the same time, you can see that the polar ice caps are melting like this, and the global temperatures are doing this, and I can show that there's a statistical correlation between those. Basically blew them out of the water, because they had no expectation that I was going to know any of that stuff going in. And the fact that you can basically teach yourself how to do that over the course of a weekend, assuming you can sit there and work on it the whole weekend, I think it makes it so that if you spent 6 months building a portfolio, you could have a lot of really impressive stuff by the time that it came time for you to start showing it off.
Okay, awesome. So James, I'll say is there any other question? I can't see any question anymore. So Rocky was asking some questions. I
saw one that said it was there a
data sets,
a pathway that can be followed. Learning pathway. So yes, I would recommend that if you have LinkedIn, there is a special part of LinkedIn called LinkedIn Learning, and it's kind of like Pluralsight or Udemy, but it's all built into LinkedIn. And oftentimes, a lot of businesses that have Microsoft 365 memberships, you get LinkedIn Learning as part of that package. So if you already have a job with a company that has Microsoft 365 subscription, check and find out if you're allowed to access LinkedIn Learning through that, because it may open up the opportunity for you to get access to all of that learning resources completely free. Even if you don't have access to that, there's also Microsoft Learn, which is just on the Microsoft website. Let me actually get those links for you as well, because those are very good things to have. So Microsoft Learn PowerBI. Okay, so it's the Microsoft Learn platform is here's this one, and here we go. And then here is the Power BI topic on LinkedIn Learning. So those are great resources. The LinkedIn Learning one is free for a lot of organizations. It may not be free for you. If it's not, then the Microsoft Learn is also a good one. There's also a lot of really great content for learning Power BI just out on YouTube. You know, the guy that I mentioned earlier, Reed Havens, he has a great YouTube channel where he interviews people who are Power BI experts, and they do deep dives on stuff. He also has little short clips where he talks about here's how to do this one thing. There's lots of great channels out there for learning that stuff too.
Awesome, 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 awesome.
Oh, and subscribe to the
James,
PowerBI.tips podcast. if you like listening to podcasts,
you got put a link. Put a link.
Oh yeah. Let me get that as well.
Link.
So
yeah, put a link.
So the podcast is called Explicit Measures, and it's run by one of my colleagues, Mike Carlo, and here's the link to that. They broadcast live every Tuesday and Thursday morning here, so it would probably be like early afternoon over there, and it's a great podcast. They talk a lot about the nitty-gritty stuff in Power BI. They talk about being a Power BI administrator. They also talk about reports, talk about consulting. Basically, if you want to learn about Power BI and you have a little bit of free time to listen on a podcast, check out that podcast because you'll learn a lot of stuff.
Wow. Awesome. I'm at the site right now. Oh, definitely. I'll check it out later. Okay, so James, we're way beyond time right now.
Oh, yeah, I'm really sorry about that.
No. Actually, I'm sorry to be right now. So I want to say thank you. For honoring our invitation. I know we took a lot of your busy schedule and everything, but thank you so much for honoring our invitation. And I'll say have a lovely week ahead. And over here, I'll say good evening. I'll say good night.
Absolutely,
so I don't know.
Yes.
Okay. So
thank you so much for hosting, and I really encourage anyone to reach out to me on social media if you have questions or anything like that. This has been an honor, and I'm really glad we had an opportunity to do this, and I hope we can do another one sometime.
Let me drop your Twitter handle again, so you can connect with James on Twitter. I've pasted it.
Please do.
Also, you can follow him on. Yeah, you can follow him on GitHub also.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep. And then I also blog on the PowerBI.tips website, and I think I had that link up as well earlier. Here, let me actually have all those links on. Let's see here. Here we go. Dump that all in a single message in the chat here. Oh, come on.
Okay.
Copy and paste.
Cool. Wow. Okay, I was about copying your LinkedIn. So I
think that's all of the links I had.
Thank you for the invitation and develop. Yeah. What's say? I didn't get a part.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I want to make sure I posted all of the links that I had on that initial slide. So I think that was all of them.
Yeah. So the file templates, the blog, the Twitter, your LinkedIn. Yep. So everyone is following you. So thank you very much, and do have a lovely week ahead.
You as
well. Bye,
guys.
Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.